"How thoughtful of you to acknowledge your real estate partner tonight of all nights, James," I said, raising my glass with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The table fell silent as my husband's face drained of color. Moments earlier, he had stood to toast the brilliant Jennifer, without whom this year's success wouldn't have been possible. Little did he know that 3 months ago, I had purchased the lakeside property where he took his weekly business meetings with Jennifer. The property that, according to the renovation contractor who had called my personal phone by mistake, was being transformed into the perfect romantic getaway Mr. Wilson requested. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My mother always told me that a smart woman holds her cards close to her chest. "Emma," she'd say while counting the money from her waitressing tips at our kitchen table, "men will always underestimate what you know and what you're capable of. Sometimes, that's your greatest advantage." These words would become my salvation 20 years later, though I couldn't have imagined how. I met James Wilson during my final year of law school. I was working part-time at a campus café to offset my substantial student loans when he walked in, confident in his expensive suit, recently made partner at his father's real estate development firm. He was handsome in that polished way that screamed privilege, perfectly trimmed hair, manicured nails, and a smile that suggested he'd never heard the word no. Our relationship progressed quickly. James was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely impressed by my academic achievements and career ambitions. "A beautiful woman with brains," he would say, as if the combination was a rare unicorn he'd discovered. I was flattered, if slightly uncomfortable with his framing. Still, when he proposed 8 months later with a ring that probably cost more than my annual tuition, I said yes. My friends were concerned about the whirlwind romance. "Are you sure, Emma? You haven't even started your career yet," my roommate Diane questioned. But I was swept up in the promise of a life so different from my childhood of financial instability and strain. James represented security, stability, everything my single mother had struggled to provide. The first indication that our marriage might not be the partnership I'd envisioned came shortly after our honeymoon. I'd received an offer from a prestigious law firm in the city, my dream job with the environmental law division. When I shared the news with James, his response was tepid at best. "That's a lot of hours for not much pay," he remarked, frowning at the offer letter. "And it's all the way downtown. The commute would be brutal." "But it's exactly what I want to do," I said, confused by his lack of enthusiasm. Environmental law has always been my passion. James set down his coffee cup and reached for my hand. "Emma, you don't need to kill yourself at some demanding job. My income is more than enough for both of us. Why not look for something less stressful? Maybe part-time? Something that would give you flexibility when we start a family?" The suggestion caught me off guard. We had discussed children as a someday possibility, not an immediate plan that should dictate my career choices. But James had a way of making his preferences sound like rational considerations for our mutual benefit. "I've worked really hard for this opportunity," I said carefully. "Of course you have," he soothed. "And I'm proud of you. I just think there might be better options that wouldn't sacrifice our quality of life." I took the job despite his reservations, but the conversation established a pattern that would define our marriage. James never outright forbade me from pursuing my goals, but he expressed concerns, raised obstacles, and subtly undermined my confidence until I began to question my own judgment. 2 years into my career, the fertility discussions intensified. "Isn't it time we started trying?" James would ask. "You're already 29, Emma. We don't want to wait too long." Each time, I explained that I wasn't ready yet. I was just gaining momentum in my career, handling important cases, making a difference. James would smile tightly and say he understood, but his disappointment was palpable. Sometimes he'd mention colleagues whose wives had stepped back from demanding careers to focus on family, always with admiration for their priorities. By our third anniversary, the dynamic had shifted in ways I couldn't quite articulate. James had become the primary decision-maker in our relationship, not through force, but through persistent pressure. The house we purchased in Pine Grove Estates was his choice, too far from my office but close to his. The friends we socialized with were primarily his business associates and their wives. Even our vacations revolved around locations where he could network with potential clients. Meanwhile, my salary went into a joint account that James managed. "You're brilliant in the courtroom, but I'm the financial expert," he would remind me whenever I questioned an investment or expense. "Trust me to handle this part." I did trust him. That was the problem. The birth of our daughter, Lily, provided James with the opportunity he'd been waiting for. "You don't have to decide right now," he said, cradling our newborn as I recovered from a difficult delivery. "But doesn't it make sense to resign instead of taking maternity leave? Think of all the moments you'd miss with her." Exhausted and emotional, I agreed to an extended leave, which gradually transformed into a resignation. James was supportive during this transition, praising my devotion to our daughter and assuring me that this temporary career pause would be worth it. "You can always go back when she's older," he promised, though his definition of older remained conveniently vague. The years that followed were a blur of playdates, preschool applications, and increasing isolation from my former professional life. I loved being Lily's mother, but I missed the intellectual stimulation of legal work, the satisfaction of fighting for causes I believed in. When I mentioned this to James, he suggested I join the neighborhood book club or volunteer at Lily's school, activities that would accommodate our family schedule without disrupting the comfortable life he'd established. By the time Lily started kindergarten, I hardly recognized myself. The ambitious law student had been replaced by a woman who checked with her husband before making social plans, who deferred to his judgment on financial matters despite managing our household budget with meticulous care, who had gradually surrendered her independence one small compromise at a time. "You should get back into the workforce," my mother urged during one of her visits. At 65, she was still working full-time, her independence fiercely protected. Even part-time, it's not healthy to be so dependent on James. "I'm not dependent," I protested weakly. "We're partners. We just have different roles." My mother's expression was skeptical. "Partners should stand on equal ground, Emma." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. From where I'm sitting, you've been demoted to junior associate with no possibility of promotion. Her words stung because they contained a truth I'd been avoiding. Still, I dismissed her concerns as outdated, the perspective of a woman whose generation had fought battles I didn't need to fight. James wasn't controlling, he was protective. He wasn't dismissive, he was confident. The distinctions felt important, even as they began to blur. The first concrete sign that something was wrong in our marriage appeared on an ordinary Tuesday. I was using James's laptop to order Lily's school supplies when an email notification appeared from a woman named Jennifer Hayes. The subject line read, "Lakeside property updates." I shouldn't have opened it. But something about the casual tone, the lack of formality in addressing my husband, triggered an instinct I couldn't ignore. "James, the contractor confirmed the fireplace renovation can be completed by October. Perfect timing for our first weekend getaway once escrow closes. Can't wait to christen the master suite. Jay." My hands trembled as I closed the email. There could be innocent explanations. Jennifer might be a client. The property could be an investment. "Our" might refer to the company, not a personal relationship. The reference to the master suite might be standard real estate language, but deep down, I knew better. Instead of confronting James immediately, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a decision independently. I would investigate, quietly, gather information, and protect myself before exposing what I suspected. My legal training, dormant for years, suddenly felt vital. Over the next few weeks, I created a Gmail account James knew nothing about. I borrowed Diane's laptop to search property records for recent lake house purchases. I documented the business dinners that kept James out late, cross-referencing them with his location data when he shared it via our family tracking app. What emerged was a pattern that couldn't be dismissed. James was indeed developing a lakeside property, but it wasn't listed among his company's projects. Jennifer Hayes was his company's newest agent, young, ambitious, and according to her social media profiles, recently divorced. Their meetings extended well beyond business hours, often concluding at upscale hotels or at the lakeside property itself. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Men will always underestimate what you know and what you're capable of. James certainly had. In his confidence that I was fully occupied with domestic concerns, he had grown careless. His passwords hadn't changed in years. His schedule was accessible through our shared family calendar. He assumed I wouldn't notice the increased business expenses, the late-night calls he took in his home office, the subtle shift in his behavior. One evening, after James mentioned yet another dinner meeting, I asked casually, "How's the new agent? Working out?" "Jennifer, right? Lily's teacher mentioned meeting her at your office party." A small lie to gauge his reaction. James paused briefly, then shrugged. "She's fine, ambitious, closes deals efficiently." "That's good," I replied, maintaining a neutral expression. "It's so important to have reliable people on your team." His relief at my apparent disinterest was palpable. Exactly. Building the right team is everything in this business. That night, I lay awake beside him, contemplating my options. Divorce was the obvious answer, but it terrified me. After years outside the workforce, with a child to support and a husband whose financial resources would fund aggressive legal representation, I was at a significant disadvantage. James had always handled our finances. What if there were accounts I didn't know about? What if he tried to take Lily? The next morning, I called the one person whose advice I needed most. "Mom," I said when she answered, "I need your help, but you can't ask questions yet. Do you still have that money you set aside from selling Grandma's house?" 3 days later, I sat across from my mother at a coffee shop 30 miles from Pine Grove Estates, where no one would recognize us. I told her everything, the emails, the property records I'd found, the suspicious business expenses. To her credit, she listened without interruption, her expression darkening with each detail. "I want to buy the lake house," I concluded, revealing my plan. "Before they close escrow. If I can do it anonymously through a shell company, James will never know. When the time is right, I can use it as leverage for a fair divorce settlement." My mother studied me with a mixture of pride and concern. "It's a bold move, using your grandmother's inheritance this way. Are you sure buying property is better than hiring the best divorce attorney you can find?" I nodded firmly. James respects power and assets more than legal threats. The shock value alone of discovering I own the love nest he's been creating will be worth it. Besides, it's a sound investment regardless of what happens with our marriage. And how exactly will you purchase a property without him finding out? Your finances are joined at the hip. Not entirely, I admitted. When Lily was born, I opened a separate account for the checks we received as gifts. James thought it was unnecessary, but I insisted. It's small, but it's in my name only. That, plus Grandma's money, should cover the down payment. For the rest, I've been talking to Diane. Her brother is a mortgage broker who can help me secure financing discreetly. My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Emma, I'm sorry this is happening, but I have to say, I'm seeing glimpses of the fierce young woman who went to law school against everyone's advice. She's still in there. I've spent years being underestimated, I replied, including by myself. Maybe it's time to use that to my advantage. The next few weeks were a carefully choreographed dance of secret meetings, document signings, and financial maneuvers. I created an LLC with my middle name and mother's maiden name, Gibson Valley Properties, to purchase the lakeside house. Diane's brother arranged financing through a lender James's company never worked with. My mother contributed her savings as promised, and I emptied the account James had forgotten existed. 2 days before the scheduled closing date on the property, I received confirmation that my counteroffer had been accepted. The original buyers, listed as Wilson Investments LLC, obviously James's shell company, had been outbid. The property, at 427 Lakeview Court, was now mine, or rather, Gibson Valley Properties. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly James would learn about the failed purchase. That evening, he came home in a thunderous mood, slamming doors and snapping at Lily over minor infractions, until I sent her upstairs to play in her room. "Rough day?" I asked, maintaining the supportive wife persona I'd perfected over the years. "Some anonymous buyer swooped in and stole a property we've been working on for months," he fumed, pouring himself a generous whiskey. "Offered 15% above asking, all cash. The seller couldn't refuse." I made appropriate noises of sympathy, while marveling at how James framed the situation. The property had been stolen from him, as if he had some inherent right to it simply because he wanted it. This entitled perspective had shaped our marriage from the beginning, I realized. James believed he deserved what he desired, whether it was a lakeside property or a wife who sacrificed her ambitions for his comfort. "Maybe it's for the best," I suggested mildly. "There will be other properties." He glared at me, irritation flashing across his features. "You don't understand business, Emma. This was perfect. Private, exclusive access to the lake, close enough for weekend trips but far enough for privacy. Jennifer and I had big plans for developing that parcel." He caught himself quickly. "The company, I mean. Jennifer was going to handle the marketing." I nodded as if I hadn't noticed his slip. "I'm sure something else will come along. Anyway, I wanted to talk about my birthday next week. I was thinking we could try that new restaurant downtown, the Capitol Grill. Just something small with you and Lily." The change of subject worked as I'd hoped. James relaxed slightly, grateful to move away from his professional disappointment. "I'll make reservations," he promised, his mood improving as he regained a sense of control. "Actually, let's make it a proper celebration. We'll invite a few friends, maybe the Mitchells and the Corteses. And I should include Jennifer, since she's new to the team and could use the connections." I kept my expression neutral despite the surge of anger. "Of course. Whatever you think is best." As the date of my birthday dinner approached, I found myself examining our marriage with newfound clarity. The pattern was undeniable. Each year, James had claimed another small piece of my independence under the guise of partnership and protection. It wasn't just financial control, though that was significant. It was the subtle undermining of my confidence, the gentle redirection of my ambitions toward goals he deemed appropriate, the careful isolation from friends who might encourage independent thinking. When had I become so compliant? The question haunted me as I sorted through old photographs one afternoon while James was at work and Lily at school. Pictures from law school showed a woman I barely recognized, eyes bright with ambition, stance confident, expression determined. In more recent photos, something had dimmed. My smile seemed rehearsed, my posture accommodating, my entire presence designed to complement James rather than assert itself. The transformation had been so gradual that I hadn't noticed it happening. Small concessions that seemed reasonable in isolation had accumulated into a complete surrender of autonomy. It's just easier to let James handle the investments. His schedule is so demanding, it makes sense for me to be the flexible one. Of course, his career takes priority right now, He's the primary breadwinner. Each rationalization had seemed logical at the time. Together, they formed a narrative of diminishment that made me ache with recognition. 3 days before my birthday, I met with a divorce attorney recommended by Diane. Helena Cortez, no relation to our friends the Cortezes, had a reputation for handling high-asset divorces with both discretion and ruthless efficiency. "Tell me everything," she said, dispensing with pleasantries as soon as her office door closed behind us. "Financial accounts, property holdings, evidence of infidelity, and most importantly, what you want from this dissolution." For the next 2 hours, I detailed what I knew about our marital assets, James's business interests, and the evidence I'd gathered regarding his relationship with Jennifer. Helena took meticulous notes, occasionally interrupting to request clarification or additional information. "The lake house purchase was clever," she commented when I explained about Gibson Valley properties. "Risky, but potentially very effective as leverage. Have you documented how you financed it?" "Every transaction," I confirmed. "My mother's contribution came from her inheritance from my grandmother. Completely separate property. The down payment from my personal account can be traced to gift checks received when Lily was born. The mortgage is in the LLC's name, with me as the sole member." Helena nodded approvingly. "Good. Now, what's your goal here? Maximum financial settlement? Custody leverage? Public embarrassment?" The question gave me pause. What did I want? For so long, my desires had been filtered through James's preferences that identifying my own priorities felt like excavating buried artifacts. "I want my independence back," I said finally. "Financial security for Lily and myself, primary custody, with reasonable visitation for James and recognition of my contributions to our marriage. I don't care about punishing him publicly, but I won't be manipulated or intimidated either." "Fair enough," Helena said, making another note. "And your career plans? Will you return to legal practice?" "Eventually, yes. I'll need time to update my credentials and rebuild professional connections. But environmental law is still my passion." Helena set down her pen and studied me thoughtfully. "Mrs. Wilson, I've handled hundreds of divorce cases involving stay-at-home mothers. Most arrive in my office terrified and desperate, with no financial resources independent of their husbands and limited options for self-support. You've taken extraordinary steps to protect yourself already. May I ask what prompted such foresight?" I considered the question carefully. "My mother raised me alone after my father abandoned us when I was 4. She waited tables, cleaned houses, whatever it took to keep us afloat. She taught me that financial independence is the foundation of all other freedoms." I paused, recognizing a deeper truth. "But honestly, I think some part of me always knew this marriage wasn't what it appeared to be. Even when I was most compliant, there was a voice in the back of my mind preparing for this moment." "Listen to that voice," Helena advised, closing her notebook. "It's usually right." As I drove home from the consultation, my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. James's name appeared on the dashboard display. "Emma, I need to change the reservation for your birthday dinner," he said without preamble. "Jennifer's cousin is visiting from Seattle, and I thought it would be nice to include him. Makes the numbers even." The transparently thin excuse to create a date for Jennifer so her presence wouldn't raise eyebrows might have bothered me a week ago. Now it struck me as almost comically inept. "Whatever works best, James. You know I trust your judgment on these things." The irony of my response clearly escaped him. "Great. Also, I'll be late tonight. Management meeting ran over and we need to finalize some projections." Management meeting. The euphemism might have been believable if I hadn't already checked his location through our family tracking app. He was at the Westbrook Hotel downtown, where, according to my recent investigations, he and Jennifer frequently met on Wednesday afternoons. "Take your time," I replied pleasantly. Lily and I will have dinner without you." After hanging up, I found myself laughing, a genuine, liberating laugh that felt foreign after years of careful self-monitoring. The intricate deception James thought he was maintaining was so obvious now that I'd allowed myself to see it. The late meetings, the business trips that extended through weekends, the unexplained expenses categorized as client development, all transparent ploys that I had deliberately ignored to preserve the fiction of our perfect marriage. What might have devastated me weeks ago now felt like confirmation that I was making the right decision. The man I had married, or at least the man I believed I had married, didn't exist. The real James was selfish, manipulative, and fundamentally disrespectful of both my intelligence and our marriage vows. When I arrived home, Lily was drawing at the kitchen table while our regular babysitter Megan prepared a snack. "Mommy, look what I made for your birthday." My daughter proudly held up a colorful creation featuring what appeared to be 3 stick figures in front of a house. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, examining the picture more closely. "Is that us?" "You, me, and Grandma," she explained, pointing to each figure. "At Grandma's house, because you said we might visit after your birthday." I felt a rush of emotion, realizing how perceptive children could be. I had mentioned the possibility of visiting my mother only once, in passing. Yet Lily had not only remembered but seemed to welcome the idea. Perhaps she sensed the tensions at home more acutely than I'd realized. "That's right. We are going to visit Grandma soon," I confirmed, making the decision official in that moment. "Would you like that?" Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Grandma lets me help make pancakes, and she doesn't talk on the phone all the time like Daddy." The simple observation contained volumes. Even at 6, Lily recognized the difference between engaged attention and performative parenting. James loved his daughter, but his relationship with her was shaped by convenience and image maintenance rather than genuine connection. "Well, you and I will have lots of pancake-making opportunities coming up," I promised, silently resolving that whatever happened next, Lily's stability and emotional well-being would remain my highest priority. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I sat in the quiet of our home office, a space James had insisted I needed despite my lack of professional work, and finalized my preparations for what would come after my birthday dinner. I updated the document detailing our financial accounts, property information, and insurance policies. I scanned birth certificates, marriage licenses, and other essential documents to a secure cloud storage account James couldn't access. Most importantly, I wrote a letter to Lily that I hoped she would never need to read, an explanation of why I had ended her parents' marriage, written with care to avoid demonizing her father while still acknowledging the truth of his betrayal. If James attempted to twist the narrative as I suspected he might, this document would provide Lily with an honest account when she was old enough to understand. The next day, I visited a safe deposit box I had rented at a bank across town, using my maiden name and my mother's address for correspondence. I stored physical copies of the most crucial documents, including printouts of emails between James and Jennifer, bank statements showing questionable transactions, and photographs I had discreetly taken of financial records in James's office. As Helena had advised, evidence gathered now could prove invaluable if the divorce turned contentious. I also deposited a small cache of emergency cash, saved gradually from household expense money over several months, and the few pieces of valuable jewelry that were unquestionably mine, received from my mother and grandmother rather than from James. Nothing would disappear from the house to alert him to my preparations, but these precautions ensured I wouldn't be left completely vulnerable if he reacted by restricting access to our joint accounts. As I completed these practical arrangements, I experienced a strange emotional detachment, as if I were handling a complex legal case for someone else, rather than dismantling my own marriage. The pain would come later, I knew. Grief for the relationship I had believed in, concern for Lily's emotional adjustment, even a certain mourning for the comfortable lifestyle that would inevitably change. But in these moments of preparation, the clarity of purpose was almost exhilarating. The day before my birthday, I took a significant step toward reclaiming my professional identity. I contacted Professor Eleanor Winters, my former mentor from MAR Law School, who now headed the environmental law clinic at the university. We arranged to meet for coffee near campus, in a café I was certain none of James's associates would frequent. "Emma Wilson?" she exclaimed when I entered, rising to embrace me. "It's been 7 years? 8? Almost 8, I confirmed, returning her hug with genuine warmth. Eleanor had been more than a professor. She had been an advocate who recognized my potential before I fully saw it myself. "Thank you for making time to see me on such short notice." When a former star student reaches out after disappearing into the black hole of matrimony, I clear my schedule, she said with characteristic directness. Besides, I'm curious what finally prompted this reunion. Over the next hour, I shared a carefully edited version of my situation, my desire to return to environmental law, the years spent focused on family, the need to update my credentials, and rebuild professional networks. I didn't mention the impending divorce or James's infidelity, though Eleanor's perceptive glances suggested she sensed there was more to the story. "The legal landscape has evolved considerably since you left. Practice," she noted, "but the fundamentals remain. Your analytical skills and passion for environmental justice were exceptional. Those don't disappear because you took a detour through domesticity." "But my credentials are outdated," I pointed out. "No firm will hire someone who's been out of practice for nearly a decade." Eleanor sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "That depends on how you approach re-entry. Our clinic always needs volunteer attorneys to supervise student casework. It's part-time, unpaid initially, but it would allow you to update your knowledge base and build recent experience. After 6 months, there might be grant funding available for a stipend position." The opportunity was precisely what I needed: flexibility to manage Lily's needs during the transition, professional relevance to build upon, and a supportive environment for re-entering legal practice. "When could I start?" I asked, feeling the first genuine spark of professional excitement I'd experienced in years. "Next month's orientation begins on the 15th, Eleanor replied. "Think you can manage that?" The timing was perfect, just after the birthday dinner that would mark the end of my marriage as I knew it. "I'll be there," I promised. As Eleanor and I parted ways with plans to meet again after my return from visiting my mother, I experienced a moment of vertigo at how rapidly my life was transforming. Within a span of weeks, I had progressed from a compliant wife ignorant of her husband's betrayal to a woman actively reconstructing her independence, piece by careful piece. The morning of my birthday dawned with deceptive normalcy. James presented me with an elegantly wrapped jewelry box at breakfast, a diamond tennis bracelet that would have delighted me in earlier years, but now struck me as a generic gift, selected with minimal thought. The price tag was substantial, the sentiment behind it perfunctory. "It's beautiful," I said, slipping it onto my wrist with practiced appreciation. "Thank you." "Only the best for my brilliant wife," he replied, kissing my cheek before returning to his phone, already responding to emails before 8 a.m. Lily proudly presented her handmade card, featuring an abundance of glitter and rainbow-colored hearts. "I made it all by myself," she declared. "Miss Johnson just helped with the cutting." I hugged her tightly, inhaling the scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "This is the most beautiful card I've ever received," I told her truthfully. "I'm going to keep it forever." My throat tightened unexpectedly as I realized how much would change for Lily after tonight. Her world would shift on its axis, secure routines disrupted, cherished assumptions challenged. I had consulted child development books and articles on helping children through divorce, prepared age-appropriate explanations, and researched therapists specializing in family transitions. But no amount of preparation could completely shield her from the emotional impact of her parents' separation. Still, I reminded myself, continuing in this false marriage would ultimately cause more harm than healing the fracture cleanly. Children deserved parents who modeled honesty, mutual respect, and healthy relationships. None of which existed in my marriage to James anymore, if they ever truly had. After dropping Lily at school, I spent the day executing the final preparations for what would come after dinner. I confirmed arrangements with my mother to receive us tomorrow, packed essential items in a suitcase hidden in my car trunk, transferred digital copies of important documents to a new secure email account, and mentally rehearsed how I would handle various scenarios that might unfold at the restaurant. In the afternoon, I visited the lakeside property, my property, for the first time. The real estate agent who had represented Gibson Valley Properties in the purchase met me at the gate, handing over keys and security codes with professional courtesy. She had no idea of the property's significance beyond being a standard investment acquisition. Standing on the deck overlooking the placid lake waters, I experienced a surreal moment of recognition. This beautiful setting, with its expansive views and tranquil seclusion, had been intended as the backdrop for my husband's infidelity. Now it would serve as a transitional sanctuary for my daughter and me, a physical embodiment of reclaimed power. I walked through the partially renovated interior, noting the high-end finishes James had specified, and the master bedroom with its enormous windows facing the water. The contractor had already completed some of the customized features James had requested: built-in wine refrigeration, heated bathroom floors, a steam shower large enough for two. All designed for romantic weekends that would never occur with the woman he'd chosen over his marriage vows. The irony wasn't lost on me, but neither was the practical value of the property. Real estate in this area had appreciated consistently for decades. The house would provide both immediate shelter and long-term financial security. It was a tangible asset that could be leveraged in divorce negotiations or retained as an investment. As I locked up and prepared to leave, I noticed a champagne gift basket on the kitchen counter, clearly delivered in anticipation of the property closing to the original buyers. The card read, "To new beginnings and endless possibilities. Love, Jay." I left it there, a silent witness to plans that had unraveled through their own arrogance. Tonight, I would offer a very different toast to new beginnings, one that James never saw coming. Returning home, I prepared for the evening with methodical calm. I selected a dress I had purchased secretly, a deep burgundy sheath that projected confidence rather than seeking approval. I applied makeup with more definition than James typically preferred, styled my hair in a less predictable arrangement, and fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings rather than any jewelry James had given me. Each choice felt like a small reclamation of identity, a rejection of the subtle constraints that had accumulated over our marriage. By the time I was ready, the woman in the mirror looked more like my law school self than the carefully curated corporate wife James had shaped over the years. As I heard his key in the door downstairs, I took a final moment alone. "You can do this," I whispered to my reflection. "You've already done the hardest part." What lay ahead would be challenging. The public confrontation, the aftermath, rebuilding life as a single mother while re-establishing my career. But nothing could be more difficult than acknowledging that the marriage I had invested in so completely had been built on manipulation and betrayal. James called up the stairs, his voice carrying that practiced charm he deployed at important social occasions. "Emma, are you ready? The reservation is at 7, and you know the Capitol Grill is strict about timing." "Coming," I replied, gathering my purse and the small envelope containing documentation of my ownership of 427 Lakeview Court, the evidence that would transform my birthday dinner into the beginning of my liberation. I descended the stairs with deliberate poise, watching James's expression shift from impatience to surprise as he registered my appearance. "You look different," he said, his tone suggesting he hadn't decided whether this was a compliment. "It's my birthday," I replied simply. I felt like making an effort. His gaze lingered, assessing this unexpected deviation from the predictable. For a moment, I glimpsed uncertainty in his eyes, a flicker of recognition that something had changed. Then his phone buzzed with a message, and his attention diverted immediately. As he checked the screen, I noticed the slight smile that appeared, the same expression he always wore when communicating with Jennifer. Even tonight, my birthday, he couldn't maintain the pretense of undivided attention. "The babysitter is 10 minutes away," he said, sliding the phone back into his pocket. "Lily's watching a movie in the den. I told her we'd say goodbye before we leave." "I'm going to check on her now," I replied, already moving toward the den where our daughter was curled up with her favorite stuffed rabbit, engrossed in an animated film. I sat beside her, savoring these final moments of normalcy before everything changed. "Having fun, sweetheart?" She nodded without looking away from the screen. "Daddy said you're going to a fancy dinner without me." "That's right, just for tonight. But tomorrow, you and I are going on a special adventure." I kept my voice light, though my heart ached at the transitions ahead. "What kind of adventure?" Now she turned toward me, interest piqued. "A surprise," I said, stroking her hair gently. "But I promise it involves that lake you've been wanting to visit." Her eyes widened with excitement. "The one with the ducks? And the sailboats?" "Exactly that one," I confirmed. "Now be good for Megan tonight, okay? I'll see you later." As I stood, Lily caught my hand. "You look pretty, Mommy, like a queen." I knelt to embrace her, breathing in her innocence one last time before our world changed forever. "Thank you, sweetheart. Remember that I love you no matter what." "I know," she replied with a child's simple confidence, already turning back to her movie. In the foyer, James was checking his watch impatiently. "The babysitter just pulled up. We should get going if we want to make that reservation." I nodded, gathering my resolve for what lay ahead. The confrontation that would end 8 years of marriage and begin my journey back to myself. "Let's go," I said, stepping through the door into the evening air. "I have a feeling this will be a birthday dinner none of us will forget." In the days leading up to my birthday dinner, I finalized my plans with precision that would have impressed my former law professors. I confirmed ownership of the lake house, arranged for new locks to be installed, and most importantly, prepared documentation proving my sole ownership of the property that I could access instantly if needed. I also did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself, selecting a dress that wasn't chosen to please James's conservative tastes. The deep burgundy sheath was elegant but assertive, with a neckline just low enough to be noticed and a hemline just high enough to be remembered. I paired it with heels I'd kept from my law firm days, when projecting confidence had been essential to my professional survival. The night of my birthday, James seemed distracted, checking his phone frequently as we prepared to leave for the restaurant. "Jennifer might be a little late," he mentioned casually. "She had a closing that ran over schedule." "On a Saturday evening?" I asked, applying a final touch of lipstick. "Real estate doesn't follow normal business hours," he replied dismissively. "You look nice, by the way. New dress?" "Just something I picked up," I said, smoothing the fabric. "Lily, sweetheart, are you ready to go? Mommy's birthday dinner is waiting." Our daughter appeared in a party dress she'd helped select, her dark hair arranged in the fancy braid she'd insisted upon for this special occasion. "You look beautiful, Mommy," she declared, twirling to show her own outfit. "Like a queen." James checked his watch impatiently. The babysitter should be here any minute. I frowned, caught off guard. "Babysitter? Lily's not coming with us?" "I changed the reservation to adults only," he explained, as if this were a minor detail not worth mentioning earlier. "The Mitchells' sitter recommended someone. I thought it would be nice for you to enjoy an evening without worrying about entertaining a 6-year-old. Disappointment washed over me. not just for the changed plans, but for the reminder of how James made unilateral decisions without considering my preferences. Of course, he wouldn't want Lily present tonight. It would complicate the narrative he was constructing, the one where his wife and mistress could socialize comfortably under the pretense of professional courtesy. I was looking forward to having her there, I said quietly. Don't be difficult. Emma, it's just dinner. You'll enjoy adult conversation for once. The familiar pattern reasserted itself, James dictating what I would enjoy, what was best for me, how I should feel. But tonight, unlike countless nights before, I had options. I had power. I had a plan. You're right, I conceded, kissing Lily's forehead. We'll celebrate again tomorrow, just the two of us. Ice cream sundaes for breakfast? Her delighted response was worth the daggers James glared in my direction. That's hardly appropriate, he muttered, as the doorbell announced the sitter's arrival. It's my birthday, I reminded him with a sweetness that disguised the steel beneath. I get to decide what's appropriate today. The Capitol Grill was exactly as pretentious as its name suggested, all dark wood paneling, white tablecloths, and waitstaff who introduced themselves as your personal server for the evening. Our table accommodated 8, James and me, the Mitchells, Tom was James's golf partner, his wife Rebecca was on 3 charity committees with me, the Corteses, Manuel was James's college roommate, his wife Sophia was the only one I genuinely enjoyed talking to, and 2 empty seats presumably, for Jennifer and whoever James had invited as her date to maintain appearances. Emma, you look stunning, Sophia whispered as we settled into our seats. That dress is giving divorce court realness. I laughed, partly at her assessment and partly at how close she was to the truth. Just felt like making an effort. Well, it's working. James can't take his eyes off you. She was right, but I suspected his attention stemmed less from admiration and more from concern about what version of myself I might present tonight. The carefully curated Emma who complimented his successful businessman image, or someone less. Predictable? Jennifer arrived 20 minutes late, offering effusive apologies that focused primarily on James, rather than the entire table. She was younger than I'd expected, early 30s perhaps, with the polished blonde perfection that graced real estate agent headshots. Her date, introduced as her cousin visiting from Seattle, had the uncomfortable look of someone who'd been recruited for a role he hadn't auditioned for. So sorry to keep everyone waiting, Jennifer gushed, taking the seat directly across from James rather than next to her cousin. The Westfield closing was an absolute nightmare, but we finally got all signatures. Didn't we, James? My husband nodded, his expression professional, but his eyes lingering on her just a beat too long. Jennifer pulled off something of a miracle today. The clients were difficult, to say the least. How fascinating, I interjected. Tell us more about these difficult clients, Jennifer. I always enjoy hearing the behind-the-scenes details of James's work. She faltered momentarily, glancing at James before launching into a carefully sanitized version of what had clearly been a fabricated closing. As she spoke, I observed the subtle dynamics at play, how James leaned forward when she talked, how her gestures seemed choreographed to display her perfectly manicured hands, how they communicated through micro-expressions that probably seemed invisible to everyone else, but not to me, not anymore. Dinner progressed with the expected rhythm of these social obligations. Business talk dominated, interspersed with discussions of children's private school applications and upcoming charity galas. I participated minimally, answering direct questions and occasionally steering the conversation toward topics that clearly made James uncomfortable, like the women's legal clinic where I'd recently begun volunteering. It's just a few hours a week, I explained when Rebecca expressed surprise. Mostly helping women understand their options regarding separation agreements, custody arrangements, financial disclosures, the basics of starting over. James's jaw tightened visibly. Emma's always had a soft spot for lost causes, he said. reaching for his wine glass. Though I would have thought your legal knowledge might be a bit outdated after 7 years away from practice. It's like riding a bicycle, I replied pleasantly, especially when the underlying principles remain unchanged, like fiduciary duty between spouses, for instance. Did you know that in our state, hiding assets during divorce proceedings can result in criminal charges? Fascinating stuff. The table fell into awkward silence, broken only when Manuel desperately introduced a new topic about the latest tax benefits for real estate investments. James shot me a warning look, which I acknowledged with an innocent smile before turning my attention to my untouched dessert. As the meal concluded, James stood and lifted his glass. Before we finish this wonderful evening, I'd like to propose a toast. First, to my beautiful wife Emma on her birthday. 36 years of grace and intelligence. The table raised their glasses as I accepted the perfunctory compliment with a nod. But James wasn't finished. And I'd also like to recognize someone else who deserves acknowledgement tonight. To Jennifer, whose expertise and dedication have been instrumental to our success this year. Without her partnership, we wouldn't be celebrating our most profitable quarter to date. To Jennifer. The others echoed the toast, unaware of its deeper significance. I watched Jennifer's face flush with pleasure at this public recognition, at being elevated to something close to equal status with the wife at her own birthday dinner. The sheer audacity of it, James using my celebration to honor his mistress, crystallized every grievance I'd accumulated over our years together. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. I raised my own glass, commanding attention as effectively as I once had in courtrooms. How thoughtful of you to acknowledge. You're a real estate partner tonight of all nights, James, I said, my smile not reaching my eyes. The table fell silent as my husband's face drained of color. I'd like to add my own toast to new beginnings and unexpected opportunities. I turned to Jennifer, whose confusion was evident. James is right about your partnership being quite profitable. That lakeside property at 427 Lakeview Court would have been a particularly valuable acquisition. Such a shame someone else purchased it first. Jennifer's eyes widened in panic, darting toward James, who had frozen with his glass midair. I don't know what you mean, she stammered. No? Let me refresh your memory. I reached for my phone, opening the email app where I'd saved evidence for exactly this purpose. According to this message you sent James 3 weeks ago, and I quote, "The contractor confirmed the fireplace renovation can be completed by October. Perfect timing for our first weekend getaway once escrow closes. Can't wait to christen the fire. Master Suite." An audible gasp came from Rebecca, while Manuel suddenly became intensely interested in his water glass. Sophia, bless her, was watching the scene unfold with poorly concealed delight. "Emma," James hissed, "this is neither the time nor the place." "On the contrary," I interrupted smoothly, "I can't think of a more appropriate occasion than my birthday to announce that I am now the proud owner of 427 Lakeview Court, Gibson Valley Properties. My company, incidentally, submitted the winning bid. The deed was recorded yesterday." The silence that followed was absolute. Jennifer looked as though she might be sick. James's complexion had progressed from pale to ashen to a concerning shade of purple. "You... what?" he finally managed. "Purchased the property you and Jennifer were planning to use for your romantic getaways," I clarified, making sure everyone at the table understood precisely what was happening. "The renovation contractor called my cell by mistake last month. Apparently Jennifer gave him both our numbers as contact options. He was quite detailed about the perfect romantic getaway Mr. Wilson requested. Fascinating specifications, by the way. The heart-shaped tub seemed a bit excessive, but who am I to judge?" James stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the hardwood floor. "We need to discuss this privately." "Like you discussed your relationship with Jennifer privately," Or how you privately decided to exclude our daughter from my birthday dinner so your mistress wouldn't be uncomfortable? I maintained my composure, years of courtroom experience flooding back. No, I don't think privacy has served this situation particularly well. Jennifer's cousin muttered something about waiting in the car and hastily exited. The Mitchells and Corteses were engaged in a silent negotiation about whether social etiquette permitted them to leave or required them to witness the implosion of a marriage they'd believed was perfect. "This is embarrassing," James insisted, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. "Do you know what's actually embarrassing, James? Discovering that your husband of 8 years has been systematically undermining your confidence, controlling your finances, and dismissing your ambitions, all while planning a future with someone else." I stood, gathering my purse with deliberate calm. But the most embarrassing part was how long it took me to recognize my own worth. I turned to our stunned dinner companions. "Thank you all for coming tonight. The meal has been charged to our joint account. James can handle the gratuity. I'll be taking a car service home to pack some essentials. Tomorrow, I'll be moving to my new lakeside property temporarily while my attorney drafts separation papers." "You don't have an attorney," James sputtered, grasping at any detail he could challenge. I smiled, feeling genuinely lighthearted for the first time in years. "Actually, I do. Remember Diana Chapman from law school? She specializes in high-asset divorces now. We had lunch yesterday." I placed my napkin neatly on the table. "Oh, and I'll be picking up Lily on my way home. I assume you'll want to continue this conversation with Jennifer privately." As I walked away from the table, Sophia caught my hand and squeezed it briefly, whispering, "Call me tomorrow, and well done." In the car service on the way to collect my daughter, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge the magnitude of what I had just done. My marriage was over. The carefully constructed life James had designed, with me as an accessory to his success rather than a partner in our future, had shattered. There would be difficult conversations ahead, painful adjustments for Lily, and undoubtedly vicious legal maneuvers from James. But for the first time in nearly a decade, I was making choices based on my own judgment rather than deferring to someone else's authority. The lake house purchase had been just the beginning, a declaration of independence backed by action rather than words. As we pulled up to my home, soon to be my former home, I texted my mother, "It's done. Coming to stay with you tomorrow. After I show Lily the lake house. Her new room has a perfect view of the water." Her response came immediately. "Proud of you, Emma. Always knew you were holding a royal flush, just waiting for the right moment to play your hand." I smiled, tucking the phone away as I prepared to collect my daughter and begin the next chapter of our story. One where the lessons she learned about her worth and capabilities would come from watching her mother stand tall rather than bend to accommodate someone else's needs. My mother had been right all along. Men will always underestimate what you know and what you're capable of. Sometimes, that truly is your greatest advantage. The 48 hours following my birthday dinner revelations unfolded in a blur of activity. After collecting Lily and a few essential belongings from our house, we spent the night at a hotel rather than facing James's inevitable return. I explained to my sleepy 6-year-old that we were having a special birthday adventure, promising more details in the morning when she could better understand. James called 17 times that night. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to his progression from angry demands to desperate pleas as the reality of his situation sank in. The final message, left at 3:14 a.m., carried the slurred edge of too much whiskey. "Emma, you need to come home. We can fix this. I'll end things with Jennifer. She doesn't mean anything. Please, just come home." The next morning, while Lily enjoyed room service pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, a hotel specialty that delighted her, I listened to the messages with clinical detachment. The man I had married would never have begged. The James I knew operated from a position of authority and control, not desperation. This new version, pleading, promising to change, was as foreign to me as the woman I had become would be to him. After breakfast, I drove Lily to the lakeside property, presenting it as a surprise adventure rather than a permanent relocation. Her eyes widened as we pulled up to the impressive house nestled among pine trees, its wide windows reflecting the sparkling lake beyond. "Is this a vacation house?" she asked, unbuckling her seatbelt eagerly. "It's our house now," I explained, choosing simple honesty appropriate for her age. "You and I are going to live here for a while, and Daddy will stay in our old house." Her brow furrowed with the natural confusion of a child whose world had just shifted. "Is Daddy coming later?" I knelt beside her, meeting her gaze directly. "Daddy will visit you here sometimes, but he won't live with us anymore. Mommy and Daddy have decided it's better if we live in different houses." "Like Zoe's mom and dad?" she asked, referencing a classmate whose parents had divorced the previous year. "Yes, exactly like that." She considered this information with surprising composure. "Zoe has 2 bedrooms and 2 birthday parties. She says it's better that way because her mom and dad don't yell anymore." The observation pierced my heart. James and I had never engaged in shouting matches. Our conflicts played out in icy silences and passive-aggressive comments. But children perceived tension regardless of its expression. Had Lily been more aware of our dysfunctional marriage than I'd realized? "We'll figure everything out together," I promised, squeezing her small hand. "Want to see your new bedroom? It has a window seat where you can watch the ducks on the lake." Her excitement at this feature temporarily overshadowed the monumental change occurring in her life. As she raced upstairs to explore, I reminded myself that children were remarkably adaptable when provided stability and honesty. My own childhood had taught me that lesson. Financial struggles had been less damaging than the uncertainty of my father's disappearance and my mother's initial attempts to shield me from the truth. While Lily investigated every corner of her new domain, I spoke briefly with Helena, updating her on the previous night's events. She advised me to document any communication from James, secure all financial records I could access, and prepare for the possibility of him attempting to restrict our joint accounts. "He's going to be angry, embarrassed, and probably vindictive," she warned. "Men like your husband don't respond well to public humiliation or loss of control. Expect him to retaliate financially first. It's the weapon he's most comfortable wielding." Her prediction proved accurate with remarkable speed. By early afternoon, my credit cards were declined when I attempted to purchase groceries at the local market. A quick check of our joint accounts revealed they had been emptied, the funds presumably transferred to accounts in James's name alone. Rather than panicking, I felt an odd sense of validation. This reactionary spite confirmed everything I had come to understand about the man I had married: his instinct to punish, his assumption that financial pressure would force my compliance, his fundamental belief that money equaled power. What James didn't know was that I had anticipated this exact scenario. The account containing the money from my mother remained untouched, providing sufficient resources for immediate needs. More importantly, Helena had already prepared emergency motions for temporary support and restoration of marital assets, which she filed electronically within an hour of my notification. "This actually works in our favor," she noted during our brief call. "Judges take a very dim view of this kind of financial hostage-taking, especially when children are involved. His attorney should be advising him to restore the accounts immediately, unless they want to start this process with the court already prejudiced against them." By evening, James's scorched earth approach had evolved into a different strategy. A delivery van arrived bearing an enormous floral arrangement with a handwritten note. "Emma, please come home so we can talk. I'm sorry. Whatever you want, we can work it out. James." The flowers, expensive, exotic blooms I had once mentioned, admiring, joined the 8 increasingly desperate voicemails and 14 text messages I had received throughout the day. Each communication revealed a man struggling to comprehend that his carefully constructed world had imploded, that the compliant wife he had shaped over years had transformed into someone beyond his control. I documented each contact meticulously, following Helena's advice, but responded to none of them. The time for conversation would come, but through attorneys in structured settings, not through emotional manipulation or grand gestures designed to re-establish familiar patterns. The following morning, after ensuring Lily was settled with a selection of new books and art supplies I had thoughtfully packed, I met with the locksmith who would change the security system codes and door locks at the lake house. As we reviewed the upgraded features, my phone rang with my mother's distinctive ringtone. "He's here," she said without preamble. "James showed up at my apartment demanding to know where you and Lily are staying." My stomach tightened with a mixture of anger and concern. "What did you tell him?" "That he needs to communicate through your attorney, and that if he doesn't leave immediately, I'll call the police." The steel in my mother's voice confirmed where I had inherited my emerging backbone. He tried the charm offensive first, then shifted to intimidation when that failed. I recorded the entire interaction on my phone, by the way. Thought it might be useful. "You recorded it?" I couldn't help laughing despite the seriousness of the situation. "I've been watching those true crime documentaries," she replied unapologetically. "Always record interactions with potentially dangerous individuals. Besides, I figured Helena might find it helpful to have evidence of his behavior." After ensuring my mother was safe and James had indeed departed, I forwarded the recording to Helena with a brief explanation. Her response was immediate. "This strengthens our position for the temporary orders hearing. Your mother should consider a restraining order if he returns." The suggestion that James might be dangerous enough to warrant legal protection struck me as excessive initially. Despite his controlling nature and infidelity, he had never shown violent tendencies. Still, the intensity of his reaction to losing control of the situation, emptying accounts, bombarding me with messages, confronting my mother, suggested an escalating desperation that warranted caution. 3 days after my birthday dinner, revelation, James's attorney contacted Helena requesting a meeting to discuss amicable separation terms. The quick pivot from James's unilateral actions to formal legal channels suggested his attempts at direct manipulation had been replaced by professional advice, a promising development that indicated he might be accepting the inevitability of divorce. "They're looking to contain the damage," Helena observed during our strategy call. "Your public exposure of his affair with a colleague has potentially significant professional implications. The Wilson family firm has a carefully cultivated reputation for tradition and conservative values. A messy divorce featuring infidelity with a younger employee doesn't align with that image." She proposed we use this leverage to secure favorable terms: primary custody of Lily, the lake house property recognized as my separate asset, substantial support payments, and a fair division of marital property. In exchange, we would agree to a confidentiality clause preventing either party from publicly discussing the circumstances of our separation. "Let them believe we're being generous by considering their reputation," Helena advised. "In reality, we're securing everything you need for a fresh start." As these legal maneuvers proceeded, I focused on establishing new routines for Lily and myself at the lake house. Each morning began with breakfast on the deck overlooking the water, followed by exploration of our new neighborhood's parks and nature trails. I enrolled her in the local elementary school, arranged play dates with children who lived nearby, and found a child therapist specializing in divorce adjustment who could see her weekly. For myself, I began the process of professional reintegration that had started with Professor Winters before the birthday dinner confrontation. The environmental law clinic welcomed me as a volunteer attorney, providing both structure to my days and renewal of skills that had lain dormant during my years as James's wife. The work, helping low-income communities challenge corporate polluters, reconnected me with the passion for environmental justice that had originally drawn me to law school. My colleagues at the clinic, mostly younger attorneys and law. Students initially viewed me with the polite curiosity reserved for someone they perceived as a wealthy housewife dabbling in legal work. That perception shifted rapidly as my analytical abilities and courtroom experience became evident. Within weeks, I was handling substantial portions of our active cases and mentoring students on research methodology and brief writing. One evening, as I reviewed case documents after Lily had gone to bed, I received an unexpected text from Sophia Cortez. "Having drinks with the neighborhood crew tomorrow. You're missed. Anyone who thinks you're the villain in this story is an idiot. James is spinning tales, but no one with half a brain believes him." Her message offered a window into the social fallout I had largely avoided by withdrawing from our former circle. James would naturally attempt to control the narrative, presenting himself as the wronged husband blindsided by an ungrateful, irrational wife. The lakeside property purchase likely featured prominently in his version, portrayed as evidence of calculation and vindictiveness rather than self-protection. "Thanks for the update," I replied. "I'm focusing on Lily and rebuilding my career. Social rehabilitation will have to wait." Sophia's response came quickly. "Screw social rehabilitation. You're building a better life. Just know you have allies when you're ready to reconnect." Her support, offered without expectation of reciprocity, represented one of several surprising alliances that emerged during this transition period. Rebecca Mitchell had quietly transferred her children's school, volunteer responsibilities to accommodate my new schedule. Manuel Cortez had recommended a financial advisor specializing in post-divorce planning. Even Tom Mitchell had apparently defended me during a golf game when James attempted to garner sympathy from mutual friends. These small kindnesses reinforced something I was gradually relearning. My value existed independently of James's assessment. Other people saw qualities in me that he had systematically diminished or dismissed. My intelligence, integrity, and resilience had always been present, merely buried beneath layers of accommodation and self-doubt that had accumulated during our marriage. 1 month after the birthday dinner confrontation, our respective attorneys had negotiated preliminary separation terms that would govern our interactions until the divorce was finalized. James would provide substantial temporary support for Lily and me, although less than Helena had initially demanded. Joint access to certain financial accounts would be restored. A visitation schedule allowing James to see Lily on alternate weekends had been established, with exchanges occurring at neutral locations to minimize direct contact between us. The first such exchange was scheduled at a popular family restaurant with a play area where James would collect Lily for their weekend together. I had prepared her carefully, explaining that she would have special daddy time while I caught up on work projects, presenting the arrangement as an adventure rather than a loss. As we waited in a booth near the entrance, Lily colored contentedly in a new activity book while I maintained outward composure despite my churning anxiety. The prospect of facing James directly, without the protective shield of righteous anger that had sustained me during the birthday dinner confrontation, felt unexpectedly daunting. When he entered, the familiar silhouette momentarily transported me back to earlier days, the handsome man in the expensive suit who had swept me off my feet, whose approval I had sought with increasing desperation as our marriage progressed. He spotted us immediately, his expression unreadable as he approached our table. "Daddy!" Lily abandoned her coloring book to launch herself into his arms, innocent of the tension between her parents. James embraced her with genuine emotion, his voice softer than I had heard it in years. "There's my girl. I've missed you so much." I stood, maintaining a polite distance. "She's had dinner, but there's a snack in her backpack if she gets hungry later. Bedtime is still 8 o'clock, and she needs her rabbit to sleep." He nodded, his gaze assessing me with disconcerting intensity. The James I knew would have asserted control, questioned my instructions, suggested alternatives, reminded me of his parental competence. This James simply listened, accepting my guidance regarding our daughter's routine without challenge. "You look different," he said finally. after Lily had returned to gathering her belongings. I wasn't sure what he meant. My appearance hadn't changed dramatically in the past month, until I recognized he was seeing the transformation in my demeanor, rather than my physical presentation. The deferential posture, the anticipatory anxiety, the careful monitoring of his reactions, all the unconscious behaviors that had characterized our interactions were absent. "I am different," I acknowledged simply. Something like regret flickered across his features before his expression settled into careful neutrality. "Helena sent over the proposed terms for the lake house inclusion in the settlement. I've asked my attorneys to review them." The property that had catalyzed our separation had become a central negotiation point. James's legal team had initially demanded its inclusion in marital assets, arguing that I had used marital funds for the purchase. Helena had countered with extensive documentation proving the property was acquired with separate assets and through an independent LLC with no connection to James. "I'm sure they'll find everything in order," I replied, matching his professional tone. The transaction was properly structured from the beginning. A flash of the old James, irritated at being outmaneuvered, appeared briefly before he controlled his expression. "Yes, you were certainly thorough in your planning." Lily returned with her backpack, preventing further discussion of legal matters. I knelt to hug her goodbye, reminding her that I would pick her up on Sunday afternoon at the same location. "Have fun with Daddy, sweetheart. Remember, you can call me anytime." As they prepared to leave, James hesitated, then spoke with unexpected sincerity. "For what it's worth, Emma, I never intended things to end this way." The statement, falling somewhere between apology and justification, hung between us, inviting a response that would reopen our personal connection rather than maintain our carefully established boundaries. The Emma who had sought his approval for years might have engaged, might have offered absolution or understanding to ease his conscience. Instead, I simply nodded acknowledgement without accepting responsibility for his emotional comfort. "Goodbye, James. I'll see you Sunday at 2. Watching them walk away, my daughter's small hand clasped in her father's, her voice animated as she chattered about school activities, I experienced a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for the family unit that had fractured, concern for Lily's adjustment to these new arrangements, apprehension about James's long-term commitment to consistent parenting. But beneath these expected reactions lay something unexpected, a profound sense of liberation. For the first time in nearly a decade, I was navigating life according to my own moral compass rather than someone else's expectations. The choices I made, from professional reinvention to parenting decisions, emerged from my authentic values rather than calculated compliance with James's preferences. As I drove back to the lake house, the property I had claimed as both refuge and declaration of independence, I contemplated the paradox at the heart of my marriage's dissolution. By attempting to control me through financial manipulation and subtle undermining, James had inadvertently cultivated the very qualities that eventually enabled me to leave him: resourcefulness, strategic thinking, and the determination to secure my own interests when threatened. The woman who had purchased his lakeside love nest out from under him, who had exposed his infidelity at her own birthday dinner, who was rebuilding her legal career while establishing a new life for herself and their daughter. This woman had existed within me all along, dormant but never truly extinguished. James had always underestimated me. That had been his fundamental mistake, and ultimately, my greatest advantage. 6 weeks after my birthday dinner revelation, I found myself sitting across from James at a polished conference table in Helena's office. This was our first mediation session, a structured attempt to negotiate divorce terms without protracted court battles. Helena sat beside me, her posture relaxed but alert, while James's attorney, Martin Blackwell, projected the practiced confidence of someone accustomed to intimidating opponents into submission. James himself appeared markedly different from the commanding presence who had dominated our marriage. His bespoke suit hung slightly loose, suggesting recent weight loss. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and the immaculate grooming he had always maintained showed subtle signs of neglect. A slightly longer haircut, the faintest shadow of stubble. He avoided direct eye contact, focusing instead on the documents arrayed before him. "Before we begin," Helena said, opening the meeting with characteristic directness, "I want to clarify our position. Mrs. Wilson's primary concerns are securing appropriate custody arrangements for their daughter, ensuring financial stability through fair division of marital assets, and retaining separate ownership of the lake house property, which was purchased independently prior to separation." Martin leaned forward, his expression courteous but firm. "And Mr. Wilson's concerns include regular access to his daughter, reasonable financial terms that don't cripple his business operations, and understanding how his wife managed to purchase a property worth nearly $800,000 without his knowledge, using what he maintains were marital funds." The subtle accusation that I had somehow misappropriated shared resources brought a flush of anger to my cheeks. Helena placed a calming hand on my arm before responding. "We've provided complete documentation regarding the lake house purchase. Gibson Valley Properties LLC was formed legally, with funds from Mrs. Wilson's inheritance through her grandmother and personal accounts established prior to marriage, or with explicitly separate funds. If your client wishes to challenge this documentation, we're prepared to litigate the matter fully." The threat of public litigation, with its attendant exposure of James's affair with Jennifer, hung in the air like a silent warning. James shifted uncomfortably, finally meeting my gaze with a mixture of resentment and grudging respect. "Let's focus on custody arrangements first," Martin suggested, clearly eager to move past the property discussion. "Mr. Wilson is proposing a standard joint custody arrangement, alternating weeks, shared holidays, equal decision-making authority for educational and medical matters." I shook my head immediately. "That won't work. Lily needs stability, especially during the school week. The constant transitions would be disruptive to her routine and emotional well-being." "Are you suggesting I'm not capable of maintaining our daughter's routine?" James's voice carried the familiar edge of condescension that had characterized so many of our marital disagreements. "I'm her father. I deserve equal time." "This isn't about what you deserve," I replied, maintaining a calm tone despite my rising frustration. "It's about what's best for Lily. She's thriving with the current arrangement, primary residence with me, alternate weekends with you, plus dinner visits during the week. Why disrupt something that's working just to satisfy your sense of entitlement?" James flushed at the word entitlement, recognizing his own frequently used term being turned against him. Before he could retort, Helena intervened with practiced diplomacy. "Perhaps we could discuss a modified arrangement, primary residence with Mrs. Wilson during the school year, with extended time for Mr. Wilson during summer and school breaks. This provides the stability Lily needs for academic success while ensuring substantial time with both parents." The negotiation continued in this vein for nearly 3 hours, each point contested, then grudgingly resolved with compromises neither side found entirely satisfactory. Financial discussions proved particularly fraught, with James initially proposing support payments well below what his income justified. "My business has been affected by recent events," he claimed, avoiding specifics that might acknowledge his affair with Jennifer. "The publicity surrounding our separation has caused several clients to reconsider their relationships with the firm. Perhaps they're reconsidering because their trusted financial advisor was conducting an affair with a junior employee while misappropriating company resources to fund a love nest," I observed mildly. "Clients tend to question financial judgment in such circumstances." Martin shot James a warning glance before he could respond to my deliberate provocation. "We're getting off track. Let's focus on concrete numbers rather than assigning blame." By the session's conclusion, we had established preliminary frameworks for custody, support, and asset division that would form the foundation for our final agreement. Nothing was officially settled, but the contours of our post-marriage relationship were taking shape. A business-like arrangement designed to minimize conflict while ensuring Lily's well-being remained the priority. As we gathered our respective materials, James lingered while the attorneys stepped outside to discuss scheduling for the next session. For a moment, we were alone in the conference room, the first time we had been without witnesses or Lily present since the night of my birthday dinner. "Why the lake house?" he asked suddenly, his voice quieter than I expected. "Of all the ways you could have exposed the situation, why that specific choice?" The question surprised me. Not its content, but the genuine curiosity behind it, rather than accusation. I considered my response carefully, wanting neither to wound unnecessarily nor diminish the deliberateness of my actions. "Because it represented everything wrong with our marriage," I finally replied. "You were creating a separate life funded by our shared resources while systematically undermining my confidence and independence. The property was tangible evidence of your betrayal? Yes, but purchasing it was about reclaiming agency, not just revenge." He nodded slowly, absorbing this perspective with unexpected thoughtfulness. "You could have simply filed for divorce when you discovered the affair." "Would you have taken that seriously?" I challenged. "Or would you have dismissed it as emotional overreaction, convinced me to try counseling, promised changes while continuing exactly as before?" The James I knew would have managed the situation just like he managed everything else in our marriage, by controlling the narrative until I doubted my own judgment. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition, perhaps, or the uncomfortable confrontation with a truth he had never acknowledged even to himself. Before he could respond, the attorneys returned, and the moment of honest communication evaporated into professional courtesy. As Helena and I walked to the parking garage afterward, she offered her assessment of the proceedings. "He's more reasonable than I expected. Sometimes these high-powered business types fight every detail out of sheer habit, but he seems genuinely interested in resolving matters efficiently." "It's not reasonableness," I corrected, understanding James's motivations, with the clarity that only 8 years of marriage could provide. "It's self-preservation. The longer this continues, the more professional damage he sustains. James will sacrifice financial assets to protect his reputation and business relationships." Helena smiled appreciatively. "Your insight into his priorities gives us significant leverage. Speaking of which, there's something we should discuss regarding Jennifer Hayes." She explained that her investigative team had uncovered concerning patterns within James's business practices. Specifically, evidence suggesting Jennifer's rapid promotion within the company had been accompanied by questionable transaction records and potential client fund mismanagement. "Nothing definitively illegal," Helena clarified, "but sufficient irregularities to warrant regulatory scrutiny if brought to the appropriate authorities' attention. We won't use this aggressively. That could edge into blackmail territory, but it's useful context for understanding his eagerness to settle. The revelation should have satisfied my sense of justice. Further confirmation that James's carefully constructed image of professional integrity was as false as our marriage had been. Instead, it triggered an unexpected wave of sadness for the man I had once believed him to be, the potential he had squandered through selfishness and duplicity. That evening, after confirming Lily was asleep in her lake house bedroom, I sat on the dock overlooking the water, phone in hand, contemplating a text I had received from Jennifer Hayes earlier that day. "Can we meet? There are things you should know. No tricks, no James involved. Just truth." My initial instinct was to ignore the message. What possible benefit could come from engaging with the woman who had participated in destroying my marriage? Yet curiosity mingled with a strange sense of kinship. Jennifer, like me, had been manipulated by James, albeit under very different circumstances. Perhaps her perspective might offer insights I couldn't gain elsewhere. After considerable deliberation, I replied with a time and location, a coffee shop in a neighboring town where we were unlikely to encounter mutual acquaintances. If this was some misguided attempt at reconciliation orchestrated by James, I would simply leave. If genuinely independent, the meeting might provide closure I hadn't realized I needed. Jennifer arrived precisely on time 2 days later, looking markedly different from the polished professional who had joined my birthday dinner. Her designer outfit had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her perfect makeup reduced to minimal essentials. As she slid into the seat across from me, I noticed her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice lacking the confident authority I remembered. "I know you have every reason to hate me, and I won't pretend I don't deserve that." "I don't hate you," I replied truthfully. "I don't know you well enough for such a strong emotion. What I do know is that you participated in deceiving me, apparently without moral qualms about becoming involved with a married man whose daughter is younger than his relationship with you." She flinched visibly at the reference to Lily, confirming my suspicion that James had compartmentalized his family life when pursuing their relationship. "I'm not here to defend myself or what happened with James. I'm here because there are things you should understand about the situation at Wilson Financial Group, things that might affect your divorce settlement." For the next 30 minutes, Jennifer detailed patterns of financial impropriety that extended well beyond the misuse of company resources for their affair. James had apparently established a complex system of shadow transactions that siphoned small percentages from client investments into holding companies he controlled independently. The amounts individually were insignificant enough to avoid detection, but collectively represented substantial sums diverted from client portfolios. "I discovered it accidentally while preparing quarterly reports," she explained. "When I confronted him, he claimed it was a legitimate compensation structure approved by the board, a performance bonus based on portfolio growth. I believed him initially because I wanted to." The familiar pattern, James presenting questionable behavior as normal, leveraging confidence to eliminate doubt, resonated deeply. How many times had I accepted similar explanations about our finances? His late nights? His business decisions? "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, studying her expression for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives. "Because the regulatory compliance officer started asking questions last week. James implied I was responsible for implementing the program, that I had exceeded my authority to boost performance metrics. He's constructing a narrative that makes me the scapegoat if this becomes public." Her vulnerability in that moment, the genuine fear of professional destruction, possibly criminal charges, contrasted sharply with the confident homewrecker I had constructed in my imagination. Jennifer was certainly not innocent, but she was also clearly another casualty of James's pathological self-interest, another woman whose trust he had betrayed when it became convenient. "Do you have documentation of these transactions?" I asked, my legal training automatically assessing evidentiary standards. She nodded, sliding a USB drive across the table. "Everything's here: transaction records, email communications, board, minutes that contradict his claims about approval. I've made copies for my own protection, but thought you should have this information given the financial implications for your divorce." I accepted the drive without committing to any specific action. "I'll have my attorney review these materials. I can't promise what will happen afterward." Jennifer's expression reflected understanding of the tenuous alliance we had formed. Not friendship, certainly, but a pragmatic alignment against a common adversary. "That's all I'm asking. Just be careful. When James feels cornered, he becomes someone you wouldn't recognize." The warning lingered with me as I drove home, the USB drive securely tucked in my purse. If Jennifer's information proved accurate, it signified not just unethical business practices, but potentially criminal financial misconduct. The implications extended beyond our divorce proceedings to James's entire professional identity and, possibly, his freedom. Helena received the drive with professional caution, promising to have her financial team verify the information before determining our next steps. If authenticated, this significantly strengthens our negotiating position. Even if James doesn't realize we possess this information, we can structure settlement terms that protect you if regulatory actions affect his assets later. 3 days passed without communication from either James or Jennifer. I focused on Lily's school activities, my increasing responsibilities at the environmental law clinic, and the practical details of establishing our new life at the lake house. The revelation of James's potential financial misconduct remained a background concern rather than an immediate priority. Then everything changed with a single phone call. "Mrs. Wilson?" The unfamiliar male voice identified himself as Detective Robert Kaplan from the Financial Crimes Division. "We're investigating certain transactions at Wilson Financial Group, and your name has come up in connection with several offshore accounts. I'd like to schedule an interview at your earliest convenience." The calm I maintained throughout the conversation belied my internal panic. I provided no substantive information, explaining I would need to consult my attorney before meeting. But the implications were clear. James had not only engaged in financial impropriety, but was attempting to implicate me in his schemes. Helena, moved with impressive efficiency when I relayed the conversation, immediately contacting law enforcement contacts to understand the investigation's parameters while preparing documentation of my limited involvement in James's business affairs. "This is a desperate maneuver," she assured me during an emergency meeting that evening. "James likely realized the regulatory investigation was progressing and decided to muddy the waters by suggesting you were complicit. It's transparent and ultimately self-defeating, but we need to address it decisively." Her strategy involved providing investigators with our own documentation, including Jennifer's files after confirming their authenticity, while demonstrating my systematic exclusion from James's financial decision-making throughout our marriage. Bank records, tax filings, and even James's own emails referring to my limited financial understanding would establish my distance from his business operations. "The biggest risk here isn't legal consequences," Helena explained. "It's delay tactics affecting our divorce proceedings. If James can create sufficient confusion around financial matters, he might convince the court to postpone asset division until investigations conclude." The possibility of prolonged entanglement with James's legal problems threatened the independence I had fought so hard to establish. After consulting with both Helena and a criminal defense attorney she recommended, I made the difficult decision to meet voluntarily with investigators, providing a detailed statement regarding my knowledge of James's business practices, or more accurately, my deliberate exclusion from them. Throughout our marriage, James consistently emphasized our separate spheres of expertise, I explained to Detective Kaplan during our carefully structured interview. He handled all investment decisions, business operations, and financial planning. My involvement was limited to household budget management for daily expenses, with specific allowances predetermined by James. I provided documentation supporting this arrangement, emails where James dismissed my questions about investment strategies, financial statements delivered to him exclusively despite joint ownership, even calendar entries showing his systematic scheduling of financial meetings when I had conflicting obligations. The detective's expression remained professionally neutral, but his questioning grew increasingly focused on James's activities rather than my potential involvement. By the interview's conclusion, it was clear the investigation's direction had shifted substantially. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mrs. Wilson," he said as we concluded. "We may need additional information as our investigation progresses. One last question. When did you first become aware of the Cayman Islands accounts listed in your name?" The question confirmed my worst suspicions. James had established offshore accounts using my identity without my knowledge or consent. "This is the first I'm hearing of any such accounts," I replied honestly. "I have never authorized, accessed, or been informed about overseas banking relationships in my name." Detective Kaplan nodded, making a final note in his file. That's consistent with our developing understanding of the situation. We'll be in touch if further clarification is needed. As Helena and I left the police station, the magnitude of James's betrayal settled over me like a physical weight. The man I had married, father of my child, had not only been unfaithful and emotionally manipulative, he had potentially committed financial crimes using my identity, placing me at legal risk without hesitation when it served his interests. "What happens now?" I asked Helena as we reached the parking lot. "Legally, the investigation will follow established protocols. Your cooperation likely removes you as a target, positioning you instead as another victim of his financial manipulation." She paused, studying my expression carefully. "Personally, you need to prepare for significant upheaval. This investigation will become public knowledge soon, affecting everything from your divorce proceedings to Lily's social environment. The recognition that my daughter would face consequences from her father's actions, potential social stigma, financial instability if his assets were seized, emotional trauma from public exposure, filled me with renewed determination to protect her from the fallout. Whatever happened with James legally, Lily deserved a childhood untainted by his selfishness and deception. I returned home to find 3 missed calls from James on my phone, along with a text message that simply read, "We need to talk immediately. Not through lawyers. This affects Lily." The manipulation was transparent, invoking our daughter's welfare to bypass legal safeguards, attempting to establish direct communication that might later be characterized as conspiracy or collusion. I forwarded the message to Helena without responding directly to James, following her explicit instructions regarding any contact during the investigation. That evening, as Lily completed her homework at the kitchen table, I maintained outward calm while internally processing the dramatic escalation of our divorce situation. The financial crimes investigation represented both validation of my decision to leave James and complication of the clean break I had hoped to achieve. "Mommy, when is Daddy coming to visit again?" Lily asked suddenly, looking up from her spelling worksheet. "He promised to take me fishing on the lake this weekend." The innocent question highlighted the painful reality of our circumstances. Despite James's betrayals, he remained Lily's beloved father. His potential legal problems threatened not just financial arrangements, but her emotional security and relationship with her parent. "I'm not sure about this weekend, sweetheart," I answered carefully. "Daddy might be very busy with work right now. Let's see what happens, okay?" Her small face clouded with disappointment, another emotional casualty of James's reckless behavior. I pushed aside my anger at him for placing us in this position, focusing instead on what Lily needed in this moment: reassurance, consistency, and protection from adult complexities beyond her understanding. "How about you and I try fishing on Saturday?" I suggested. "Grandma sent those new poles last week that we haven't used yet." Her expression brightened slightly. "But you don't know how to fish, Mommy." "Then we'll learn together," I promised. That's what adventures are for. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Helena called with updates that confirmed my decision to avoid direct contact with James had been wise. The investigation had expanded dramatically, with regulatory authorities issuing emergency orders freezing several Wilson Financial Group accounts pending review of transaction records. James attempted to withdraw significant funds from joint marital accounts this afternoon, she informed me. The bank flagged the transactions given the ongoing investigation. He's growing desperate, which makes him unpredictable. "Should I be concerned about safety?" I asked, glancing toward Lily's bedroom. "I don't think he presents a physical threat," Helena assessed. "But as a precaution, I've arranged for temporary security monitoring at the lake house. A private firm will maintain discreet surveillance starting tomorrow morning." The suggestion that such measures might be necessary, that the man I had married could potentially become dangerous as his carefully constructed world collapsed, sent a chill through me despite Helena's reassurance. I double-checked the security system before finally retiring for the night, sleep elusive despite physical exhaustion. Dawn brought news reports confirming the investigation had become public knowledge. Local business publications referenced irregularities at Wilson Financial Group requiring regulatory review, while financial industry outlets provided more detailed coverage of potential client fund misappropriation. James's name appeared prominently in these reports, along with mentions of his family connection to the firm's founding partners. My phone rang continuously throughout the morning, calls from former social connections seeking gossip disguised as concern, reporters requesting comments, even parents from Lily's school inquiring about playdates with transparent curiosity about our situation. I declined all contact, focusing instead on maintaining normal routines for Lily while coordinating with Helena regarding legal developments. By mid-afternoon, James's desperation had reached a breaking point. Against explicit legal advice, he appeared at the lake house unannounced, bypassing the security monitoring by approaching from the waterside in a rented boat. I spotted him from the kitchen window as he docked at our private pier, his normally impeccable appearance disheveled, his movements erratic. I immediately called both Helena and the security firm while moving Lily to her upstairs playroom with instructions to continue her art project. "Mommy needs to talk to someone downstairs," I explained calmly. "Please stay up here until I come get you, okay?" "Is it Daddy?" she asked, peering toward the window. I saw a boat. "Yes, it's Daddy, but he and I need to talk about grown-up things first," I replied, maintaining a reassuring tone despite my racing heart. "Stay here, sweetheart. I'll come get you when we're ready." James was pounding on the back door by the time I descended the stairs, his face visible through the glass panels, contorted with emotion I hadn't witnessed during our entire marriage. I activated the recording feature on my phone before approaching the door, standing at a safe distance while addressing him through the closed entrance. "James, you're violating the temporary custody arrangement by coming here unannounced. If you want to see Lily, you need to follow the established protocols." "Open the door, Emma," he demanded, his voice carrying an unfamiliar edge. "This isn't about custody arrangements. It's about you giving that USB drive to investigators and destroying everything I've built." The accusation confirmed my suspicion that Jennifer had informed him about our meeting, likely attempting to protect herself as the investigation intensified. I maintained my position several feet from the door, responding with deliberate calm. "I've cooperated with a legitimate investigation, as any law-abiding citizen would. If you're concerned about legal matters, you should communicate through your attorney, not by trespassing at my home." "Your home?" he laughed bitterly. "You think you're so clever with your secret property purchase and your righteous indignation? You've ruined my reputation, threatened my freedom, and now you're keeping my daughter from me." "Lily is upstairs," I acknowledged. "She's safe and well cared for, which is my primary concern given your current state. This isn't an appropriate time for visitation." His expression darkened further as he processed my refusal. "You don't get to make that decision unilaterally. She's my daughter too, and I have rights regardless of whatever else is happening. Rights that don't include violating court orders or frightening her by appearing unannounced in this condition," I countered. "Please leave, James. Your attorney can contact Helena to reschedule your visitation once you've composed yourself." For a moment, I thought he might escalate. The tension in his body language suggested barely controlled rage, unlike anything I'd witnessed from him previously. Then, abruptly, his demeanor shifted into the calculated charm that had once captivated me. "Emma, please," he entreated, voice softening. "I know I've made mistakes, serious ones, but don't use Lily as punishment. Let me see her, just for a few minutes. After everything that's happening, I need to know she's okay." The manipulation was so transparent, it almost seemed desperate, attempting to reframe his unannounced appearance as paternal concern, rather than intimidation. Before I could respond, the security team arrived, two plainclothes professionals approaching James with professional restraint. "Mr. Wilson, We need you to return to your vehicle and leave the property," the senior officer stated calmly. "Mrs. Wilson has requested you depart immediately." James's facade crumbled instantly, his expression contorting with undisguised fury. "You've turned everyone against me. The investigators, our friends, even my own daughter. You won't get away with this, Emma. When the truth comes out, everyone will see what you really are." As the security team escorted him back toward the dock, his parting words carried across the distance between us. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." I watched until his boat disappeared across the lake, hands trembling with delayed adrenaline response. The confrontation had revealed a version of James the Fur had never encountered during our marriage. Volatile, overtly threatening, unburdened by the social constraints that had previously governed his behavior. The calculated controller had been replaced by someone frankly dangerous when cornered. Helena arrived 30 minutes later, reviewing the security footage and my phone recording with professional detachment before addressing the implications. "We'll file for an emergency protective order immediately. His behavior constitutes harassment at minimum, possibly intimidation of a witness in an ongoing investigation." "What about Lily?" I asked, glancing toward the stairs where my daughter remained safely occupied. "How do I protect her from this situation without depriving her of her father?" Helena's expression softened slightly, the attorney momentarily yielding to the human being. "Supervised visitation only at neutral locations until we have clarity about both his legal situation and emotional stability. The court will prioritize her well-being over his parental rights if presented with evidence of potential risk." The protective order was granted the following morning, temporarily suspending James's visitation rights while establishing clear legal consequences for further unannounced contact. Explaining this development to Lily required careful navigation of complex emotions and age-appropriate truth. "Daddy is having some grown-up problems right now," I told her as we sat together on her window seat overlooking the lake. "He needs time to solve those problems before your regular visits can continue." Her small face crumpled with confusion and disappointment. "Is he sick?" "Not sick exactly," I clarified, searching for words that would provide understanding without unnecessary detail. "Sometimes adults make mistakes that have serious consequences. Daddy made some mistakes at work that he needs to fix. Until then, the judges who make family rules have decided it's better if you and I stay here while he works on his problems. But I miss him," she said simply, the innocent statement encompassing grief I couldn't fully alleviate. "I know you do, sweetheart, and he misses you too. This much I could say truthfully, whatever James's other failings. When it's safe, and the judges say it's okay, you'll see him again. I promise." That evening, as reports of James's professional unraveling dominated local news, his suspension from Wilson Financial Group pending investigation, client exodus from the firm, regulatory authorities expanding their review to additional accounts, I contemplated the dramatic reversal our lives had undergone. The man who had systematically controlled our marriage through financial manipulation, emotional undermining, and professional dominance now found himself stripped of authority, reputation, and even basic parental rights. The wife, whose independence he had gradually eroded, now stood as primary decision-maker for their child, owner of significant property, and cooperating witness in the investigation dismantling his career. The justice in this reversal offered little satisfaction, given the collateral damage to Lily's security and emotional well-being. The ultimate irony of James's downfall was that his greatest victim remained the daughter whose future he had jeopardized through selfishness disguised as ambition. As I stood on the deck watching moonlight shimmer across the lake, the property that had catalyzed our marriage's implosion, I recognized that the confrontation at my birthday dinner had merely initiated a process that James himself had accelerated through increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control. His financial crimes, attempts to implicate me, and finally his threatening appearance at our home had completed the transformation from respected businessman to possible criminal defendant. My phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. "They've frozen all his accounts. He's staying at the Westview Motel on Highway 16. Thought you should know where he is. J." Jennifer's final communication, providing James's location as implicit warning, represented the closing of one chapter in this unfolding drama. Whatever her role in our marriage's dissolution, she had chosen to prioritize truth over loyalty to James in these final stages, perhaps recognizing that we shared a common experience as women manipulated by the same calculating man. I forwarded the information to Helena without response to Jennifer, then returned my attention to the peaceful water stretching before me. The lake house that James had intended as sanctuary for betrayal had instead become refuge for renewal, a physical manifestation of reclaimed power and emerging possibilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, legal proceedings, financial negotiations, continuing efforts to protect Lily from unnecessary trauma. But tonight, standing on property I had claimed through my own resources and determination, I allowed myself to acknowledge how far I had traveled from the compliant wife who had deferred to James's authority in all things. The woman who had purchased his lakeside love nest, exposed his infidelity at her own birthday dinner, navigated financial investigation, and now stood as protector of their daughter's well-being. This woman had always existed within me, awaiting the courage to emerge. James had indeed underestimated what I knew and what I was capable of. That mistake had cost him everything he truly valued: reputation, authority, unquestioned access to his daughter. The reversal was complete, transforming the power dynamic that had defined our relationship from beginning to catastrophic end. 1 year after the birthday dinner that changed everything, I stood on the deck of the lake house, watching the sunset paint the water with streaks of gold and crimson. So much had transformed since that night when James had toasted Jennifer, and I had revealed my ownership of their planned love nest. The criminal investigation into James's financial improprieties had concluded 3 months ago with a plea agreement that spared him prison time but imposed substantial financial penalties, professional sanctions, and 5 years of probation. The man who had once dominated boardrooms and manipulated everyone in his orbit now worked as a consultant for a small investment firm 2 states away, his reputation permanently tarnished, his family name removed from the company his grandfather had founded. Our divorce had finalized 6 months earlier, with terms far more favorable than I might have imagined when first discovering his affair. Primary custody of Lily remained with me, while James received structured visitation that had gradually expanded as he demonstrated stability and commitment to therapy. The financial settlement acknowledged my contributions to our marriage, despite my years away from professional practice, providing sufficient resources to rebuild my life without dependency on his continuing support. Most significantly, the lake house had been recognized as my separate property, the purchase validated as legitimate and funded through non-marital assets. What James had intended as a secret retreat for his infidelity had become my sanctuary and Lily's beloved home, the place where both of us had discovered strengths we hadn't known we possessed. "Mom, come see what I caught!" Lily's excited voice carried across the water as she reeled in another small fish from the dock where she sat with my mother. At 7, her resilience continued to amaze me, adapting to our new life with enthusiasm, despite the painful adjustments in her relationship with her father. "That's your 3rd one today," I called back, making my way down the steps toward them. "You're becoming quite the angler." My mother looked up with quiet pride as I approached. At 66, she had become an essential presence in our reconstructed lives, spending weekends at the lake house and providing the stable grandmotherly influence Lily needed during the turbulent transition. "She's a natural," Mom said, helping Lily unhook the wriggling sunfish before returning it to the lake. "Reminds me of you at that age, determined to master whatever caught your interest." The comparison warmed me. For years during my marriage, I had lost connection with that determined girl, allowing James's subtle undermining to convince me I was less capable, less decisive than I actually was. Reclaiming that core identity had been as important as reclaiming financial independence. As Lily cast her line again with improving technique, my phone vibrated with an incoming email. The sender, Eleanor Winters from the Environmental Law Clinic, brought an immediate smile. After months of volunteer work rebuilding my legal skills and professional networks, I had received an official offer last week to join the clinic's staff as Associate Director, a position that would combine my environmental law expertise with new responsibilities developing community education programs. Good news? My mother asked, noting my expression. The university approved my flexible schedule request, I confirmed. 4 days at the clinic with Fridays remote from home, perfect for balancing work with Lily's needs. My mother's approval was evident. I never doubted you'd find your way back. The law was always your calling. The transition back to professional life had been challenging, but profoundly satisfying. The environmental law field had evolved during my absence, requiring intensive study to update my knowledge base. Yet the core analytical abilities and advocacy skills remained intact, merely dormant during my years focused on accommodating James's expectations rather than pursuing my own ambitions. Dinner that evening was a casual affair on the deck. Grilled fish Lily had helped catch, summer vegetables from the garden I'd planted in spring, and the easy conversation that characterized our new family configuration. As darkness fell and my mother took Lily inside for her bedtime routine, I lingered outside, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The most profound changes weren't the external circumstances: new home, renewed career, different financial situation, but the internal transformations that had occurred through necessity and deliberate choice. The woman who had once checked with her husband before making social plans now made decisions affecting multiple communities through her environmental advocacy work. The wife who had deferred to James's financial expertise now managed complex grant budgets and organizational resources with confidence. My phone chimed with a text message from Sophia Cortez, one of the few friendships from my married life that had survived the transition. Thinking of you today. 1 year since the dinner party of the century. Still the most satisfying public reckoning I've ever witnessed. Drink soon to celebrate your new job? I smiled at her characteristic directness. Sophia had provided unwavering support throughout the divorce process, refusing to choose sides despite her husband's long friendship with James. Her perspective, uncolored by outdated notions of marital obligation or social appearances, had helped normalize my decision to prioritize self-respect over maintaining a damaged relationship. Absolutely, I replied. Next week after Lily's dance recital? And thanks for remembering. Hard to believe it's been a year. The anniversary hadn't escaped my notice, but its emotional significance had diminished as new milestones replaced old wounds. The birthday that had once represented the culmination of my marriage's failure now seemed like the first day of my life's reconstruction, painful but necessary, like setting a broken bone to enable proper healing. The following morning brought Lily's scheduled weekend with James, now conducted with reasonable civility, rather than the tension that had characterized earlier exchanges. He arrived precisely at the agreed time, waiting in the driveway rather than approaching the house, a boundary respect that had developed gradually through necessity and court mandate rather than natural inclination. Lily raced toward his car with the exuberance of childhood, her weekend bag bouncing against her side. I followed at a more measured pace, maintaining the polite distance that defined our co-parenting relationship. She has a dance recital Thursday. Evening, I reminded him as he helped Lily with her seatbelt. The details are in the shared calendar. She'd like you to attend if you can manage the drive back for it. James nodded, his expression softening when addressing anything related to Lily. I've already arranged to leave work early that day. Wouldn't miss it. The man before me remained recognizably James, still handsome despite the stress lines. That had deepened around his eyes, still carrying himself with the practiced confidence that had once captivated me. Yet subtle changes revealed the impact of consequences finally experienced. A newfound humility in his interactions, an absence of the dismissive tone that had characterized so many of our marital exchanges, an apparent recognition that his relationship with his daughter now required genuine effort rather than entitled expectation. "She's been practicing her solo every night," I offered, a small kindness in our careful co-parenting dance. "She's really excited for you to see it." Something like gratitude flickered in his expression, acknowledgement that I could have poisoned Lily's perception of him, but had chosen instead to support their relationship despite his betrayals. "Thanks for letting me know. I'll make sure to mention it on the drive." As they pulled away, Lily waving enthusiastically from the back seat, I experienced the familiar mixture of emotions that accompanied these transitions. Relief at the brief respite from parenting responsibilities, concern about Lily's emotional well-being during the separation, and lingering sadness for the family unit that had fractured through James's choices and my necessary response. Back inside, I settled at my desk to review case files for Monday's clinic meetings. The work, challenging, meaningful, aligned with my deepest values, provided both purpose and perspective. Environmental litigation often required years of persistent effort before resulting in meaningful change, a timeline that had taught me patience with my own personal and professional reconstruction. My phone rang with a name I hadn't expected, Jennifer Hayes. Our communication had dwindled to occasional text messages following the conclusion of the investigation into James's financial misconduct. Her cooperation with authorities had ultimately reduced her own legal exposure, though her professional reputation had suffered substantial damage through association. "Emma, I hope it's okay to call," she began tentatively when I answered. "I wanted to let you know I'm moving to Colorado next week. Fresh start, new position with a real estate development firm focusing on sustainable housing projects." The information wasn't particularly relevant to my life, yet I understood the impulse behind sharing it. Some need for closure, perhaps, or desire to demonstrate she had learned from the experience that had connected our lives so uncomfortably. "That sounds promising," I replied, maintaining the neutral but civil tone I had established for our limited interactions. "Sustainable development is an important field." "It is," she agreed, seeming relieved by my response. "Actually, that's partly why I called. Your work at the environmental law clinic inspired me to look for opportunities that align better with my values. After everything that happened, well, I wanted to build something positive instead of just chasing commission checks." The acknowledgement that my choices had influenced her professional redirection created an unexpected moment of connection. Not friendship, certainly, but recognition of shared growth emerging from complicated circumstances. Whatever her role in my marriage's dissolution, Jennifer had also been manipulated by James, albeit under very different conditions. "I hope it works out for you," I said with genuine sentiment. "Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild." After we disconnected, I found myself contemplating the ripple effects of that birthday dinner confrontation. How one moment of reclaimed power had initiated transformations extending far beyond my immediate circumstances. James's professional downfall, Jennifer's career redirection, my own renewal of purpose and independence, all emanating from the decision to purchase the lake house and reveal its ownership at precisely the right moment. Later that afternoon, I met with Elena Vasquez, a local environmental activist whose community had been fighting water contamination from a nearby industrial facility. The clinic had recently agreed to represent the neighborhood association in their legal action, with me serving as lead attorney on the case. "The company's latest settlement offer is insulting," Elena explained as we reviewed documents spread across my dining table. "They're proposing minimal remediation with no ongoing monitoring or health support for affected families." I nodded, already formulating our response strategy. They're hoping financial pressure will force quick settlement. Most of these companies count on communities lacking resources for prolonged litigation. Exactly what they told us at the town meeting, Elena confirmed. Their lawyer basically said we should be grateful for any compensation given the uncertain causation between their chemical dumps and our children's respiratory problems. The corporate dismissal of legitimate concerns, the assumption of power over vulnerable communities, the expectation that intimidation would force compliance. The pattern was distressingly familiar from both my professional and personal experience. They've miscalculated, I assured her, recognizing my own story reflected in her community's struggle. They assume you'll accept less than you deserve because challenging them seems too difficult. Our job is to demonstrate that underestimating you has consequences. As we developed our approach, I shared insights gained from earlier environmental justice cases, while Elena contributed crucial community knowledge that would strengthen our position. The collaborative process, two women combining different expertise toward shared goals, represented everything my marriage had lacked: mutual respect, recognition of complementary strengths, partnership without domination. When Elena departed with renewed determination and our litigation strategy fully developed, I felt the deep satisfaction that had been absent during my years away from professional practice. This work mattered, not just for career advancement or financial compensation, but for tangible improvement in people's lives and protection of essential resources. That evening, enjoying the rare solitude of Lily's absence, I treated myself to dinner on the deck with a glass of wine and the novel I'd been trying to finish for weeks. As darkness fell and stars appeared in the clear sky above the lake, I allowed myself to acknowledge how dramatically life had changed in the year since James had raised his glass to toast Jennifer at my birthday dinner. The woman who had once measured her worth through her husband's approval now derived satisfaction from meaningful work, supportive relationships, and internal standards of integrity. The marriage that had gradually diminished my sense of self had been replaced by connections that enhanced rather than eroded my identity. The financial dependence that had constrained my choices had transformed into self-sufficiency built on reclaimed professional competence. Most importantly, the lake house that James had intended as setting for betrayal had become something entirely different. Foundation for rebuilding, sanctuary for healing, symbol of reclaimed power. Every morning, I awakened to the view he had selected for clandestine weekends and experienced instead the satisfaction of having transformed his deception into my liberation. As I raised my glass in a private toast to the journey of the past year, I thought about the women like Elena fighting corporate dismissal, like my mother who had modeled independence throughout my childhood, like Lily who would grow up seeing her mother stand firmly in her own authority rather than bend to accommodate someone else's expectations. To underestimated women, I murmured to the star-reflected lake, may we always exceed expectations, especially our own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.